All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another weekly market analysis. Here we go. This is going to be for April 24th through 28th. That is week number 17 out of 52. Let's see what the market has for us coming up this week. So I've come up with just a slightly new layout. When you see the charts, the top row will be the futures. So in this case, you have the Russell, the S&P, the Dow, and the NASDAQ. On the bottom row will be the ETFs, IWM, SPY, DIA, and QQQ. And so it'll basically be monthly, weekly, and daily charts in that order. Futures on top, ETFs on bottom. All right, so for example, here's our monthly charts. We have the futures on top, ETFs right below it. So let's take a look at the first stack up here. We have the Russell and the S&P. So for the Russell monthly chart, really uncommitted right now. Same for the S&P. Really not a whole lot of commitment one direction or the other. In other words, it's not a dominant uptrend or a dominant downtrend. It is really kind of just range bound, going up, going down, stuck in this range. No real dominant commitment by the bulls or the bears. So we really have to wait for a truly change of structure to happen. In other words, it breaks out into higher highs and higher lows, or breaks lower into lower lows and lower highs. That hasn't happened yet. We're really just kind of floating along sideways here for the most part. And then on the Dow and the NASDAQ, a little bit different story. It is slightly bullish. There's definitely some bullish activity going on there, more than the other markets that we just covered. We can see on the Dow, if we have a higher low that's forming right now. It's not complete yet, but that is encouraging for the bulls. And it's definitely had a stronger move up and a short pullback so far. And we're starting to recover from that pullback and head higher a little bit there. So slightly bullish. Same thing on the NASDAQ, slightly bullish there. Last month was very bullish. In fact, it closed right at the high with a big, tall candle, a big expanded range right there. Very bullish month for the NASDAQ. And so far, really a small, narrow range candle. So far this month, still a week to go. So we'll see how it ends this week. But just slightly bullish activity going on. Obviously, that support at the 260 to 280 held nicely on the QQQ. All right, moving on to the weekly charts. On the Russell, we can see it's still range bound. It's been range bound for a very long time, pretty much a year now. And so it's stuck between that 1,700 to 2,000 range on the futures market, or on the IWM, the ETF, stuck between about 160 to 200, call it. And really, it just hasn't broken above or below, which is fine. If price comes down into that support area at the 160, 170, look for bullish positions. And if it rallies back up into that 200 area, look for bearish positions. We just simply play the range. It's one of the easiest trades in the world. Buy low, sell high, buy low. Just play the range until eventually price breaks out of that range, one direction or the other. And then that would obviously be your stop out on that trade, but that's okay because now you know it's going to start trending either up or down, and then you can just trade the trend on that. But as long as it's range bound, just keep playing the range. Look for bullish opportunities on the low range there, bearish opportunities on the high range. Real straightforward and simple trade on that. On the E-mini S&P 500, we can see the location is bearish, being in that resistance or supply all the way over there on the left, about the 4,200 area. However, it is a little bit bullish right now. We have seen some higher highs and higher lows. I'll say slightly higher high and slightly higher low, but that is bullish, mildly bullish, let's call it. Same thing on the SPY. You can see that mildly bullish activity going on there. It is in resistance, although it's come into that resistance several times right there. And because of those higher lows, that tells me that the price is slightly more bullish than it is bearish. So all things being equal, I would expect price to continue a little bit higher right there. Being in resistance, you just never know. It certainly could turn, and I'm going to talk about that when we get to the daily chart. You'll see what the trade strategy is going to be on that. Moving on to the Dow, we can see kind of the same concept there where price is in resistance, but a little more uncommitted. A lot of slop and chop here. I mean, look at that price action. It's just all over the place. No definite direction up, no definite direction down, just up and down, up and down, up and down for the past many days. Really, since the end of last year, it really started its slop and chop pattern here. So something like that, we just stay away from. There's no real definite, dominant price structure that's obvious and clear and compelling to trade right now, other than just simply playing the range. But on something like that, I'd personally rather trade a range-bound market more like the Russell, because that's a lot more clear and compelling. On the NASDAQ, we can see location, really nothing going on there at the moment, although we do have some resistance coming up a little bit above it right there. The direction is bullish. And we are starting to see, as far as price structure goes, some narrow range candles or a tightening of the range. In other words, the candles that you see are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, that can make it hard to trade depending on the style of trading you're doing. It doesn't give you as much profit potential if you're trading, smaller time frames. But this is really encouraging, and I really like these patterns a lot, because when you look at price movement, it's either contracting, getting smaller, or expanding, getting taller or larger price moves. And because we have 1, 2, 3 weeks now of this tightening or narrow range candles going on, the shortening of candle ranges, what that tells me is the next step of price action is going to be an expansion of price. You're going to see that on the daily chart real soon here. So this is very encouraging, although these past 3 weeks, let's call them kind of boring, not a whole lot going on from price action standpoint. What this tells me is when it does explode either up or down, we get that price expansion, which comes next. That's where the real excitement happens. So let's take a look at the daily chart. You can see that a little more in detail. All right, coming up, I just want to make this announcement right now. I am going to be giving you access to all of these slides that I'm showing you. You can download them for free as a PDF, and all the market analysis, the commentary, the comments, and the trade opportunities as well that I'll be posting. That's coming soon, so stay tuned. I will show you how to get access to all that information. Yes, it's free. I'm not asking anything for it. Just download it for your own, educational enjoyment there, and just to learn and get better at your own trading. So stay tuned. I will be posting that shortly and give you instructions on how to access all that. Okay, here's the daily charts right here. Now, a lot of commentary on this. Again, this is why I want to give you the downloads for this so you can read it and digest it and put it on your charts if you want to as well. So let's look at the Russell right here. I'm calling this a very lazy bull, and that's really what it is. It's a slight uptrend or moderate uptrend, really kind of going flat and sideways the past several days. So it's a very lazy bull. There's a possible breakout above the resistance line sometime soon. So be ready for that. Be ready for, if it does break out to the upside, a possible pullback buy entry on that. But really right now, because of this laziness of this bull, I'm just staying away from this market at the moment. I want to see a more exciting bull, a raging bull, a bull that's, awake. This one's kind of napping at the moment right here. And you can see that on the IWM as well. So I'm just waiting for price to decisively break above that resistance, called about the 170. That's called about 180. And if it does that decisively, then I'll look for a pullback entry to buy on that. But as of right now, it's really not on the watch list at the moment. On the S&P 500, though, this is where it starts to get a little interesting. Remember, you can see that narrow range candles, the shorter candles, the tightening. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. We can see there's that tightening. The ranges are getting smaller and smaller. That's the contraction going on the daily chart there. Remember, we saw that on the weekly, and this is what it looks like on the daily. And so we're expecting that expansion to happen next. So because price right now is sitting in resistance on the futures market, about called the 4,200 area there, this really could go either way. That's why I put the dotted lines there. The expansion could be to the upside, in which case we get a breakout going higher, or it could be to the downside. Now, if it goes down, if it breaks down on that, we do have support about the 4,000 area right there, big psychological number as well. So we could be looking for some short-term buying opportunities if it drops down in there. But if it rallies and, the expansions to the upside, then we'll just simply wait for it to pull back into about that 4,200 area right there for a buy setup. Again, depending on what else is happening out there in the world, but all things being equal, that's what we're looking for. And then on the SPY, really the same concept. You can see, yes, it is bullish as far as the direction goes. And the location is bearish. If you look directly to the left, there's a swing high. That's resistance up there. So it's sitting in that resistance right now. That's why it's really like, hey, this could go either way. It could expand and go to the upside and the bullish trend continues. Okay, great, fine. Then we can just, buy those pullbacks. Or if it breaks down to the downside, because it's in resistance, that would not be uncommon at all, then we can look for a very short-term short trade on that, or just wait for it to get down into support down there. Like we said, about the 4,000 mark on the futures would be a great spot. On the Dow, similar situation in that it's in resistance right now. You can see that on both the futures and the ETF, DIA. So I'm calling this really a tired bull. We can see it's had a very strong run up. That looked great. That was wonderful at the time for the bulls. But now that momentum is stalling out. That bullishness, that vigor is just not quite there anymore. So the direction, yes, it's still bullish, slightly bullish, but the location is bearish. So this could go either direction here. So very similar to the SPY. Just be ready for either a breakout to the upside. If it breaks above that resistance, sure, we can buy those pullbacks and, just the uptrend continues. We're just buying pullbacks in the uptrend if that happens. If it breaks down to the downside, again, it's in resistance, so we got to look at these things. That's a definite possibility. So for example, let's just take the DIA. If it breaks below that 336 or so area there and then pops back up, good. Look for that short-term shorting opportunity and to ride it back down into support, or just simply wait for price to come back into a support area for a buy setup. But right now, that's the play. On the NASDAQ, interesting situation going on here. The tightening, you can see a little bit more clearly on this one, that those narrow range candles, lots of dojis and little teeny tiny, bodies and wicks and tails on there. So that's the contraction I was talking about. So again, it's boring when you look at that, when you're trying to trade it. There's really not much going on from a trading perspective. You're like, man, this is boring. Yeah, kind of. But what happens next is definitely not boring, because you get that big expansion, those big, tall, blue or red candles right there. And that's what we're going to be looking for next. If you look at the QQQ, we can see that's that contraction, or what I call the box pattern. Basically, it's just in a box. It's trading in that sideways range. And again, that tightening, that contraction, we're expecting that expansion to happen next. So we want to be ready for a breakout and a pullback, which actually leads to the focus market of the week. And that's the QQQ. So again, we can see this, a little bigger picture here of the daily chart. We can see to the left here, a large bearish resistance or supply overhead, directly overhead, in fact. So that is going to make it difficult if price breaks out to the upside. If that happens, it's probably not going to go very far, because you have that big swing high resistance right there, which will probably cause it to come right back down. Now, that's not a horrible thing, though. So let me play this out here for a moment, okay? Let's just say, for example, that price breaks up and it goes into that resistance. What's going to happen? Well, most likely what's going to happen, at least, is price is going to meet that resistance or that supply and then drop right back down into that box pattern, which will act now as a form of support right around that 315-ish area. And then we can look for a possible buy setup right there, and price continues making those higher highs and higher lows. And that would be one expectation. The second scenario is that if price breaks down, and again, that wouldn't be a surprise because we're pretty close to that swing high resistance there. So if price breaks to the downside, we do have support pretty close by underneath there, about the 305, 310 area. And then we have some backup support about the 295 area. So there we could start looking for some buy setups, some bullish patterns, some bullish trades would be a good setup on that one there. All right, so anyway, so that's really the focus for what I'm going to be looking for coming up this week right here. Stay tuned for weekly market updates, and I will see you back here next week. God bless and good trading, everybody.